The point I was coming at in the last installment was basically that all rational therapies are bureaucracies, and therefore, in essence, undertaking some form of rational therapy is no different from filling out a long form for illness benefit or something like that. It's onerous. It's a wretched task, but at the end of it, there's something good, supposedly. In the case of an application for illness benefit, there is something good because hopefully you get the illness benefit, or if you're signing on, hopefully you'll get income support or something. So though the bureaucracy in that case is onerous, if you stick at it and don't get put off, you will get something for it, very likely. In the case of rational therapies, the prospect is not quite so rosy because there is no benefit. It's just all rigmarole with no benefit. It's a wearisome, rotten old task that we have to undertake out of this sense of moral duty to change ourselves. When changing ourselves is the most impossible thing there ever was. One way to try and make all of this seem a bit clearer would be to look at the way in which we compartmentalize, and that therapies become compartmentalized parts of life, disconnected from all the other parts of life. Here's my therapy, here is all the other things that I do in life. And that could be true for everything. It is true for lots and lots of things. Here's my yoga, this nice little box, and there's the rest of my life. Here's my mindfulness practice, whatever the hell it is. But none of that crap works because it can't work if it's compartmentalized. All it is ticking a box, and all this is a way for me to get to feel that I'm doing something when I'm not. It's theatrical. It's just for the sake of appearances. So one of the interesting things that came out of the discourse on mindfulness and how mindfulness has been incorporated and distorted by Western culture is this whole idea of how we straight away have used it in a compartmentalized way so as to fix our anxiety or whatever it is, fix our health in some way, while totally ignoring the rest of our lives and also totally ignoring society as a whole. We beaver away within the compartment as if that actually means a damn. And there is a parallel here with the whole of our mental health industries, psychiatry. And the compartmentalization in this case really comes down to blaming the brain for whatever's going on. So in our infinite wisdom, we spot the culprit and we point the finger and say, hey, Mr. Brain, well, this is your fault. Now we have to fix you by giving you medications or doing this or doing that. And as we do that in our very professional way, and it is intimidatingly professional, but it has to be to put us off the scent, really, that it's all bogus. It's intimidatingly professional, but the point is, our thinking is so ridiculously narrow as not to be worthy of being called thinking at all. It isn't thinking. It's some kind of dodge that we automatically do because we don't ever want to face up to the truth. So here we could say we have a situation in society where lots of people are getting depressed and anxious and lots of other forms of mental illness. And we're looking at this organ, this fantastic feat of engineering which is so far beyond anything we can comprehend. Engineering maybe isn't the right word, but it's kind of like an engineering. This most fantastic organ which is embedded in society. So here we have a society which is wall-to-wall banality. It's just so stupid, it just doesn't bear thinking about. The world we've created, the life we've created for ourselves is abysmally tedious. It's dreadful. It's absolutely abhorrent. It's a joke. How could we ever have done it?
Yeah, you're absolutely right to disagree.
Human beings are born with such immense potential, such immense promise, and they're slotted into this dumb-ass society of ours. And we're told that a great future lies in front of us and there's all these possibilities, but really we're just termites, and that's not right because it's not fair to termites to say that. Termites have way more dignity than we do in that respect. But we don't look at that. Instead we look at the brain. Millions and millions and millions of years of evolution. And we say, hey brain, you're acting up. Look at you. Or we could pick on the genes, or we could pick on something else maybe. But one thing we don't look at is this stupid, stupid life that we've made for ourselves. And if we did, we'd say, well, it's no wonder people are suffering in all these ways. Suffering is the appropriate thing to do in this situation. But the overall system of society, which is the system of thought written large all around us, has only one imperative, and its imperative is to perpetuate itself come what may, and it manages this. It's the same as the ego in this regard. It's another way of looking at the same thing. The collective mind is a giant ego. What it does, it perpetuates itself and continues itself forever and ever, which is its prime directive, by never questioning itself. That is the only way it's going to work. If I question myself, I have to change. Therefore, I don't question myself, and this is true for society as well. So, of course, the collective mind is never going to look in the right place. It's always going to look in the wrong place. It has to. There's absolutely no way that a collective of us is ever going to question the collective of us. That's a mechanical impossibility. That just does not happen. Only the individual has the potential to do that kind of questioning, and the individual, as Jung says, counts for nothing in mass society. Kind of the individual is kind of like an irritant, an irritation. It just gets in the way, as we know. Just like an unruly patient gets in the way of the smooth working of the institution of the hospital, so the individual gets in the way of the smooth working of society. So that's how in psychiatry we compartmentalize. And in the case of mindfulness, as it's been pointed out, mindfulness gets to be a way in which we can ameliorate our suffering to some extent, make ourselves a little bit more content, a little bit more peaceful, whilst totally ignoring our lives. And this is a very obvious criticism, and it's no less true for being obvious. And then you get the scenario where institutions and organizations use mindfulness as a way to improve the performance of the human beings that make it up. And it seems to be perfectly fine as far as we're concerned. So I work in a hospital, and there's this thing called stress reduction. Whatever in God's name that means, I really don't know. And despite having worked in psychiatry for 25 years, I really don't know what they mean by stress reduction. God knows what they mean. Does anyone even care if they know what they mean? Do they care if they know what they mean? And so what that means is we can function better within the context of that institution, that organization, which is good for the institution, good for the organization. It's got nothing to do with questioning the institution or organization. Obviously it doesn't. If you don't believe me, just go along to one of these courses. Go on a course for stress reduction or stress management. What a fantastically offensive term that is. Go to one of these courses, stress management, and see how much questioning of the system goes on in it. They'll question you in terms of, well, maybe you're not doing all you can do to function within the system, but they don't question the system. So in the case of mindfulness, for an institution or an organization to use mindfulness for its staff like that is quite frankly an abomination. It's turned everything on its head, and yet we quite happily accept it because we have this awful gullibility or obedience. Ouspensky says that our worst failing, our worst vice is obedience. He doesn't say anything else, he just says that, but the reason he says that is because obedience equals stupidity. Nothing else, just pure stupidity. So it's no wonder we get ourselves into such messes. And when we're faced, not that it's easy to question or stand up to, when we're faced with the immense system of bureaucracy which enfolds us from all sides, it's very hard indeed not to just be dutiful. Be pressurized so expertly, so masterfully. The manipulation is awesome. The manipulation is just fantastic. And we start off in life not suspecting that there is this manipulation. No one warns us to expect it because we naively think it's all working for our good. The systems are working for our good. The institutions are working for our good. So we're lambs to the slaughter, really. We're all going to be made into kebabs, and there's very little chance that we won't be made into kebabs. And in a way, you could say it is through no fault of ours, because, as I've just said, the forces that are against us, ranged against us, are so immense. It would take a spectacularly heroic feat to see what's going on and to stand up against it. By which I don't mean going around saying that the system is bad and being a rebel, because that's just playing into the hands of the system. True rebellion has nothing to do with taking a stance which is anti-system. So another way in which we can look at the compartmentalization which dooms all of our attempts at therapy, in as much as there is compartmentalization, therapy is always doomed, is this way that we have of seeing all of our mental health afflictions, whether it's anxiety or depression or OCD or anorexia or whatever it is, as being discrete, almost like discrete physiological things. Almost like if you had an unsightly wart going on the end of your nose. So you go into a clinic and obviously you'd like someone to cut it off, preferably with a bit of anaesthetic, but cut it off. And that's fine. That works for warts, pretty much, as far as I know. But then if we do the same with anxiety, whatever it is, it does not work. And it can never work. And if we took the trouble to reflect on it, we'd see that, of course, it can't work, but we don't even want to look at it. We just don't want to question it. And the reason it won't work is because all of these difficulties aren't separate from life. They can't be treated as separate. So if I have a form of mental suffering or mental distress, that doesn't go away no matter what I do. That isn't just some oddity that can be treated as a mere malfunction. What it is actually life itself. That's a manifestation of life itself. It's the whole thing. Life itself is manifesting in my anxiety, in my OCD, in my anorexia, in my depression. And so if I'm going to respond in a helpful way to this mental suffering, I have to not dismiss it, not treat it as a little thing. I have to realize that I'm face to face with the great enigma, the big difficulty of life itself, the existential challenge. I'm face to face with the existential challenge, and respect myself for being face to face with it, and also respect the existential challenge for being the existential challenge. We have to respect the existential challenge. You just have to. You can't make it into some little trivial problem that can be solved by CBT or something like that. How low mankind has fallen to think that the great existential challenges which humanity has been wrestling with for untold millennia can be solved by CBT. How bizarre. It's become so trivial. So like your man, Aaron Beck, he notices his patients tend to think in a negative way. And in the awesomeness of his genius, he gets the idea of rearranging the thinking so it's not negative. And I don't really know about Aaron Beck, so I could be being grossly unfair to him, and I apologise if I am. But I'm only using him as an example of our whole modern way of thinking. What we fail to appreciate is that through the millennia, awesome intellects, I don't mean expert narrow intellects, I mean intellect in a true sense. And you could say this is intellect which has terawatts, it's measured in terawatts, have confronted the existential challenges of life. Not that they come with any answers, because they aren't any answers, but they've met with them and become wiser as a result. So then we bring to bear maybe a few minutes thought, or a few days thought, or a few years thought maybe, but not even very profound philosophical thoughts. A few watts, 100 watts, 1,000 kilowatt of intellect. And we think we've solved the existential challenge of life. And that's what it is. If we're thinking negative and we can't stop our negative thoughts being negative, and we can't stop them coming and making us suffer, that is life itself. And we have to bring to bear in it the whole of ourselves, not just some tiny little rational part of ourselves, not just a rational mind. We have to bring to bear the absolute whole of ourselves, and then we can rise to the challenge. CBT ain't going to do it, and DBT ain't going to do it. None of that stuff is going to do it. We're trivializing. We're trivializing the difficulties of life which have been there and always will be there, and that are synonymous with life itself, and acting as if we can fix them in some bureaucratic way so that we can get on with the business of what? Because what we're doing isn't life at all. What we're doing is a pointless self-defeating game. So we want to fix life so we can get on with our pointless self-defeating game. And that's it. That is putting it in a nutshell. That's just spelling it out. That is where we are at as a collective. So that's pretty fantastic. Thanks for watching.